Hey guys, so this is sorry about that. I had to scoot the live stream back just a little bit. This is going to be the live stream for Thomas Jefferson, third president. I pulled up a couple stats on him. I was helping a friend out, and they needed to transfer cars, and so I drove to get them, picked them up, and then just time got away from me. Sorry about that. So Thomas Jefferson is a interesting president. And if you guys have any questions or you want to add anything, please leave a comment and I will try to highlight them. I am by myself tonight, so it's going to just be me talking. So I'd love to hear your comments on what you think about Thomas Jefferson. If you've read this book, John Meacham wrote this one. He kind of talked about in his introduction and at the end where a lot of things were coming out about Thomas Jefferson with his extramarital affair with Sally Hemings and some of the DNA evidence of that. And he wanted to paint him in a positive light. So this is a very positive view of Thomas Jefferson and who Thomas Jefferson was. I have some personal issues with him, his duplicity, really, of how he said one thing but did another, and that is a complicated problem. He wanted to create this, as he wrote the Declaration of Independence, this all men are created equal, but then he was totally fine with slavery. He was totally fine with leaving them in slavery, and it really conflicted his I'm totally willing to have an affair, but I'm a godly man. I believe in God, but I'm totally willing to step outside of my marriage and encourage other people to step out of their marriage. I believe slavery is okay. So really a complicated time reading it. So I'll get into it a bit. I've got some notes right here on the computer, so I might reference those notes. But again, love to hear your thoughts on this guy. Oh, sorry. Stop it. Sorry, my speaker is touching metal, and it was getting weird. If you guys can hear me okay, give me a thumbs up on the YouTube, and I will talk to you guys through the live stream. So let's jump in. Starting with Thomas Jefferson was born April 13th, 1743. He was an American statesman, diplomat, lawyer, architect, musician, philosopher. Basically, if you could do it at the time, he did it. And he was very involved in the Virginia legislature, and I think they called it the House of Burgesses back then. And he kind of was mentored by the original governor, and he really learned a lot from the original governor of Virginia. And so it was an interesting time with him. I know his dad, in this book, it really talks about his dad, and his dad was like a giant of a man, and everybody wanted to know his dad. What was his father's name? I wrote it down here. Shoot. Okay, 6'2". Oh, no, that was Thomas Jefferson, not his dad. Sorry, I should have wrote in my notes which page I needed to turn to. I usually try to do that. That's the Sally Hemings one I wanted to talk about. Peter Jefferson. Peter Jefferson seemed larger than life, and everyone wanted to know him. That was Thomas's father. So when Thomas's father died, it kind of left a power vacuum in his family, and he was then sent to live with other people and kind of learned his he was described as like a peacemaker, but he was more of like a manipulative. He spent a lot of time doing the thing that he thought people wanted. And supposedly he learned that while he was living with this other family. The other name of that other family was the Randolphs. So William Randolph died when Thomas was 2 or 3. Wait a minute. Okay. He would stay with the Randolphs from the time he was about 2 or 3 until Thomas Jefferson was 9 or 10. So there was a lot of kids around. So when he was looking, he was smaller, and he was one of those kids that didn't always assert themselves. I kind of think about my son when he was playing soccer. Anytime the other kids would run for the soccer ball, he would kind of step back and be like, okay, you can have it. Kind of what I think of with Thomas Jefferson. Like, he would let other people do things, and then he would be kind of like in the background saying, oh, well, if you do that, maybe this will happen or that'll happen. Kind of how I thought about Thomas Jefferson. And then during the American Revolution, Jefferson was the representative for Virginia, and him and John Adams kind of created a friendship. John Adams encouraged Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence. I know I kind of talked about it in my John Adams live stream. He said that Jefferson was a better writer and that he was a better speaker. So he thought that Adams thought that he should speak and that Jefferson should write. And a lot of the things in the Declaration of Independence were left out. He supposedly would keep a version of the Declaration of Independence, and he would read the unedited version to friends at home. Like, say he was having a party or something, and he would read the unedited version to people to say, this is what I wanted it to be, but it's not exactly what I envisioned it as, because it just kept getting whittled down as the legislature kept talking about it. Being from Virginia, you had a lot of major players coming from Virginia. And John Meacham actually talks about how at Jefferson, you had Thomas Jefferson, then you had what was it? You had Jefferson, Madison, Monroe are all disciples of Jefferson, and then you also had Van Buren and Jackson, Andrew Jackson, were all like political disciples of Thomas Jefferson. So it was really interesting. They talked about, other than John Quincy Adams, for about 30 years, someone who idolized or was a friend of Jefferson was our leader in the White House, which is kind of crazy. And as you look at the influence that Virginia had in our first presidency, you have Washington, Jefferson, Monroe, Madison, Van Buren, and I think even I just said his name, Jackson. So Virginia shaped what our country looked like in the very beginning of the century, the very beginning of our history. Virginia was such a huge part of what was going on there. And I think that was an interesting perspective, knowing that a lot of those men were slave-holding men from Virginia who had a different perspective. I wish more men like Adams would have been part of our country in the early onset. So I wanted to show one thing, something I'd like to know more about how well perceived Jefferson was back in the day. I know he's held in a lot of high regard. President John F. Kennedy said this: I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge that has ever been gathered together in the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. He said this at a dinner in honor of all the living recipients of the Nobel Prize in 1962. Like, he was held in such high regard. So many people, hey, Alan, how are you, buddy? So many people held him in this high esteem, and it was so difficult as I read the book to see exactly, yes, he did a lot of interesting and amazing things, but I didn't see all that they were talking about. I don't understand him being held in such high regard. Interesting note about Sally Hemings. We know that Sally Hemings, through DNA evidence, was his mistress for almost 40 years. And let me find the note that I wrote about her. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. Sally Hemings, his late wife's enslaved half-sister who tended to his personal quarters at Monticello, they produced 6 children, 4 who lived, and gave rise to 2 centuries of speculation about the true nature of the affair. Was it about love, power, both, And if both, how much was affection? How much was coercion? Jefferson's connection with Sally Hemings lasted from about 1787 to Jefferson's death in 1826, almost 40 years, like I said. I think it's a really interesting to look at his relationship with a slave woman. Hey, book zealots, how are you guys? New to the live feed, want to participate in the presidential read-alongs? Yes, please join us. I just started Madison on was Saturday. I just started it, so I'm not too far in it. If you guys want to join in the Madison part, this is talking about Thomas Jefferson. Please chime in and let me know what you think, because he is a interesting character. We are currently just kind of talking about his being the governor of Virginia and some Sally Hemings stuff at the moment. And so I don't think that a slave can give consent. And even if there's no scenario where that slave has the ability to really, even if she did love him, she didn't have the ability to say no. So even if she chose to do it, it still isn't right. I just don't see. Oh, sweet. Thanks, Alan. I'll show that too, so you guys can see it. We read Valis in as a buddy read, and it is a interesting book. And Very Literary Carrie also tagged me in that tag. I'm very excited to do it. Speaking of presidents. So yeah, I don't find any Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson had 6 children total, and 4 of them made it to adulthood. And he had 3 or 4 children with his wife. He was very into creating children. But his wife, when she died around the same time that she died right around the same time that he was taken out of office as the governor of Virginia, because Virginia was getting invaded by the British, and he fled Virginia. So he was branded a coward, and kind of had to fight for his reputation when he left. He did, as a state legislator, draft a law for religious freedom, which is good. He served as the governor of Virginia. He was the second governor of Virginia during the American Revolutionary War. I'm just getting my notes together here. Yeah, that's all they have in my notes. But I do remember, I have the Jefferson book you're discussing, but not the Madison book. I thought most of the descendants of Sally declined DNA testing. Was he the type of person to force his slave? I don't know. See, that's never written about. And it's hard to understand if he had, could you imagine, like, your whole life is wrapped around this person. So in what way do you have the ability to not say yes? Yes, Adams and Jefferson did die on the 4th of July, Alan. I'll put that up as well. That was really cool. I will talk about that near the end. But yeah, I don't know how many he tells a very positive tale of Thomas Jefferson. John Meacham, he wrote this in response to all the accusations coming out. So it is a very, very positive light look at Thomas Jefferson. It is the facts plus just how awesome he was. And I'm not sure if John Meacham was just like, look, I studied him in school and he was great. I want to learn more about him. But it was one of those scenarios where I read it and it definitely felt like rose-colored glasses, if you know what that means. Like he was definitely telling us the good stuff about Jefferson, and he mentions some of this stuff. He definitely doesn't ignore it completely. And he spends a little time in here talking about how he pursued a married woman for about 3 years. And I think I have it in one of my notes here. Like, he was enamored with this married woman, and she was married with children and wanted to have an affair with this married woman. And he could not have, like, he wasn't going to accept no for an answer. So I'm totally sure that if Sally Hemings would have said no, that it would have been a problem. And they mentioned later that there was a captain. His name was actually Ramsey, which is kind of sucky for me. But there was a captain on a ship that was really, really enamored with Sally. Supposedly, she was like fourth generation half black. So she looked very, very white. And she was very pretty as well. So from what I understand, the captain kept trying to have Sally Hemings in his cabin, and then I can't remember exactly how that was thwarted, but it was like a scenario where her beauty was kind of the problem, which sucks. You know, you shouldn't have to be afraid of your beauty, and so. Maybe that was the sense of protection. She's like, my master takes care of me, and maybe that's where she sought his help. I'm not sure exactly, and we don't really get her story. There's a couple fictionalized tales of it. I know Christy Lewis read one where it's a fictionalized tale of the two oldest boys of Sally Hemings, who are Thomas Jefferson's sons. We're pretty sure. And it was kind of talking about like their life where they wanted acceptance from their father. They lived in the house with their father. And upon his death, the only slaves he freed were Sally Hemings and her children. He freed no other slaves that he owned. So I'm definitely pretty sure that they're his children and that she didn't have much of a choice. Bookzealots, you wrote another comment. Let me show that real quick. Yeah, as a woman, I can put myself in Sally's position, and who's to say that eventually feelings came in later? Awful situation for her. I completely agree. I could imagine that there was just, let me just try to make the best of a bad situation. It's probably what happened there, and I feel horrible for her on that. So his wife, his original wife, who was Sally Hemings's half sister. So her father sired her. I don't know if that's an appropriate term. If it's not, let me know. But he was her father with a slave woman. And so he told when he died early, and her mother died early, and had stepwives come in, and she hated her stepmothers. So when she died, she didn't want Jefferson to ever marry again. And that's probably part of it as well. So he promised his wife, a very promiscuous man, promised his wife he'd never marry again. So I think that was his kind of stopgap. She asked him to take care of his sister and to never marry again. So, you know, but she died right around the time that he was going out of office, because he was branded a coward as the Virginia governor. And then before he left for Paris to be a diplomat to the people of Paris, and he fell in love with Paris while he was there. He took his oldest daughter with him, and just fell in love with the country of Paris, and kind of shaped his philosophy for the next few years. As we talk about with Adams, when his wife was supposed to go over at the same time. Abigail Adams was supposed to go over at the same time to Paris, because John Adams was there with Benjamin Franklin, and they were co-diplomats, I guess. But then John Adams was moving to Britain. He was going to take over right after the American Revolution, where we had declared independence. John Adams was the first ambassador to Britain, and that was really cool when we talked about his life. But Benjamin Franklin was coming home, and Thomas Jefferson was taking over as diplomat to the French people, who were in the middle of their own revolution. So there was a consortium of people that were kind of running things in the French at that time, in the French area at that time, and Jefferson was very enamored with that. He was happy to meet John Adams again. They were great friends up until he politically betrayed him while he was his vice president. And then after John Adams and Thomas Jefferson got out of office, they renewed their friendship through letters and died on the same day, like Alan was talking about, which is really, really crazy. They died on the 4th of July, on the 50th anniversary of the 4th of July together. It was nuts. So after Patty Jefferson was his wife. Let's see. Yeah, so the British came in, landed a bunch of vessels, and burned the town of Hampton near Norfolk, Virginia, and he just ran and tried to get away. Benedict Arnold was there, the great traitor Benedict Arnold. I hate Benedict Arnold. Like, how can you betray America? Like, he just makes me so mad. I like the list of things they took along with them to Paris: clay pipes, tobaccos, barrels of beer for breakfast. Yeah, I'll show that as well. Hey, yeah, it's they're I wrote down too, like, he thought that to stay healthy you had to like dip your feet in a bucket of cold water every morning. So he'd have a slave bring a bucket of cold water next to his bed when he normally woke up at like 6 a.m. It was just crazy, like how they decided to think about certain things. And he was a big proponent of everything made in America is better than the things that are made in Europe. And he would get in like political like conversations with people in Paris about how things made in America were better than things made in Britain and Paris, which, American engineering is great. But there were some things that are made better there. Probably lace, probably made better in Paris for sure. So let's go to the next part of my notes here. All right. So at the beginning of the country, you had two parties. You had the Federalist Party, and you had the Republicans. Not the Republicans we see today. That Republican Party was kind of created around the end of slavery. Their actual mantra is to end slavery. It's in their it's in their mission statement or whatever. So this version of the Republican Party that Thomas Jefferson headed went away, and the Democrats kind of became that party, and then the Federalists kind of died as well. Parties change. Right now we're kind of stuck in the Republican Democrat situation, but you've got other parties that could one day gain prominence. It doesn't feel like it with the last election. As a libertarian, I go, come on, man, we speak good sense. But we'll see how that goes. But back then, parties rose and fell, just like things do now. Oh, you wrote something here. Let me put it up. I'd like to recommend An Artist in Treason regarding betraying America, and it takes place after the war. I don't know if you guys watched. There was a TV show on FX. I watched it on Netflix, but called Turn. And I kind of learned a lot about Benedict Arnold there. And then I learned more about Benedict Arnold in the Washington and the Hamilton biographies, because they dig into it because they were both in the war. I would definitely, I'm going to add that to my TBR, An Artist in Treason. Because he didn't gain a whole lot from it. The British hated him for being a betrayer. And, he could never come back to America, his home. It was a very interesting situation. It really, really was. I think he lived out in a little farm in Britain for the rest of his life, and he was kind of ostracized. But yeah, I'd love to learn more about it. Maybe like a more of his biography. I've got a Benjamin Franklin biography, which, as I learned more about Benjamin Franklin, I realized how kind of crooked he was. And you kind of really humanize these people. Like, I remember learning about them in school. It's more about Wilkerson than Arnold, but it is disturbing. Yeah. I remember hearing about Wilkerson, but it's not talked about much. So that would be really, really interesting, actually. I would love to check that out. An Artist in Treason. I'm going to write that down before I forget. Okay, I got it. I'd like to learn more about Ben Franklin. Yeah, I would too. He created some really cool and interesting things. But when he was in Paris, he was a notorious, scandalous man. He cheated on his wife with multiple women in Paris, and did a bunch of things. And he's even been accused of being a serial killer. They found a bunch of bodies under his house, like that. It's kind of hard to explain. Like, it may not have been him because he spent so much time out of the country. But it's like, it could have been him. Yeah. So I would definitely like to read his biography and see, maybe some conspiracy theories about him. Yeah. His time in Paris was pretty well. If you've watched the, John Adams, miniseries that was on HBO. You kind of see a little bit of that. John Adams, who is very Puritan, did not like what he was doing at all. So like it was pretty crazy to think about like what he was doing there. All right, so back on Jefferson because I got a little distracted. Okay, so as we get into him being a representative to Paris, he did a lot of things for the American people that kind of, because he was such a friend with the, I did see that on the Adams HBO show. Yeah. Oh yeah. I've never heard that about all the bodies under his house. He was never home though. That is one case in his benefit. He was almost never home. So it could have been someone else. But I think there was like 8 buried bodies under his home or something like that. I'll have to Google it. Actually, I have Google right here. Let's find out. Dead bodies under Franklin's house. Okay. Why was Ben Franklin's basement filled with skeletons? Repairs on the Franklin's old London house. Okay, this was his house in London. I'm sorry, I thought it was in Philadelphia. Turned out to be 1,200 pieces of bone from at least 15 people. For nearly 2 decades leading up to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Benjamin Franklin lived in a London house on 36 Craven Street. They were doing repairs, and there was a 1 meter wide by 1 meter deep pit with over 1,200 pieces of bone. It doesn't say exactly why. The most plausible explanation is not mass murder, but an anatomy school run by Benjamin Franklin's young friend and protege, William Hewson, said The Guardian in 2003. So, yeah, I'd like to look into that a little bit more because, 15 dead people under his house. But it could have been a school where they studied cadavers and they were just like, why get rid of them? We can just bury them here. They had very interesting thoughts on that kind of stuff back in the day. So as we jump into the founding of the country, if you know much about the First Continental Congress, they were very, very weak. And he was kind of a proponent of that weakness. He wanted the states to have more rights than the federal government. He was very opposed to the Federalists, Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, not initially in the first because he was the first Secretary of State, mostly because of his great relationship with the French. And the French at that time, because there was so much strife going on in France, and you were really seeing things come together, and then Napoleon came in later. They really wanted a Secretary of State that knew a lot about the French people and so the first executive cabinet had so many different parties come together. You had Hamilton as the Secretary of the Treasury, who was a very federalist, idealistic guy who wanted a national bank and wanted to really everybody who was in the military. So Knox, who was the first Secretary of War, Washington, and Hamilton all believed that a strong federal government would be the best way to keep the country safe. So when they noticed that the Continental Congress had to beg the states for money to fund the Continental Army, they did not appreciate that. So Jefferson, on the other hand, was a very states need to have their rights, states need to have their autonomy. He was a big proponent to not like the government bought every state's debt, but Virginia didn't have any debt at that time because they made enough money to pay their debt off. And so thinking in that light, he believed that the states had more rights, but then some states didn't have the ability to do those things. And if he had been one of the first 2 presidents, we may not have the strong federal government that we have. We might have a more loosely connected government. But even though he was a huge proponent of that, he wanted a state autonomy right given like ideal. He spent a lot of time, and his biggest thing that he's probably remembered the most for was adding half of the country. If you look back here, see if I can get my finger in the right spot. The Louisiana Purchase started here, all the way up through Minnesota, over through here. He doubled the size of the country with $3 million. Like, he did an amazing thing. When you look at the size of the country, I mean, all the huge swath of the country. I wonder if I can find a quick picture of it, how big the Louisiana Purchase was. It was ginormous when you consider what he did. So he wanted the states to have rights, and then he added all this land that he wanted to create slave states through that land. Let's do Louisiana Purchase and Louisiana Purchase. There it is. I've looked it up recently. Images. Let's see if I can share my screen with you guys real quick. Share screen. All right, so we're going to be looking at this screen. We're going to share it. Okay, so I will expand this out so you can see it. Okay, so if you look at the size we had here, what happened? Okay, that didn't do what I wanted to. Okay, can I make that bigger? Here, that kind of lets you know if you can see that. The Louisiana Purchase went all the way through Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, most of Minnesota, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, the top half of Texas, Colorado, Wyoming, and most of Montana. Like, just a huge purchase happened because he saw an opportunity, and John Meacham kind of gives it the idea of he took this opportunity because the French had given the Spanish the rights to Louisiana and Louisiana Purchase right around the time that Adams was in office. So they were letting the Spanish run it because there was so much going on. Napoleon was trying to conquer Europe, basically. And then the Spanish gave Louisiana back to the French, and Thomas Jefferson was like, whoa, we can't have a hostile government right on our door. We have to do something about it. But also, most likely, he really enjoyed the opportunity to create a huge part of the country and expand the country in a way that had never been done before. Up to that point, we had only added small swaths of land, buying a little bit from Spain and a little bit from Britain as we, moved westward. So really interesting to see his purchase and kind of his warring ideologies there, where he decided that I want the government to be small, but then I want to create this huge part and legacy building empire with the Louisiana Purchase. Sorry, my throat's really dry. I wish I had some water down here. So as there's a picture of Madison. So we've got, this book's really nice because it has color pictures. I don't know if you can see. That doesn't help. So we have Washington, Franklin. This is really hard to do in the camera without being weird. You've got, this is Monroe. Who is that? That's John Adams, really? Yeah, that's John Adams. Okay, I'm going to tell you who they are. Madison's over here. You got Abigail Adams. You have Franklin. You have these guys. That's not Monroe. That's Gilbert Stuart. Oh, no, it is John. I knew it was Monroe. Sorry, I knew I was right. And then Jefferson's time in France with Napoleon and their agreement, friendship. So I think I'm kind of fizzling out here. Let me make sure that I say everything that I want to say with his presidency as we move into. I find it interesting. I'm trying to look through my notes here. I kind of got started rushedly. I usually like to go over my notes one more time before I get started. And he really considered himself it says in my notes here that he was influenced by Christianity, but he was kind of a Christian in the loosest sense of the term. He didn't believe that you should do you have a book? I didn't see that. I'm so sorry. Do you have a book recommendation on Arnold? I do not. I've never read a book on him. Sorry, I didn't see that comment for a while there. But if there is a good one, I will definitely look it up. So trying to think where I am here. So, I was talking about his Christianity. Yes, Thomas Jefferson appears to have a history of unethical behavior and decisions. Yeah, he mentioned early in his life, like when he was in college, that he felt like Christianity held you back too much. He felt like there were desires and wants. There's a sect of Christianity called, is it Gnostic Christians, where they believe that you're going to heaven no matter what, and you should live your life the way you want to. Just remember that Christ is Christ, and you go to heaven. Kind of a it's I believe that once saved, always saved. So that's a part of Christianity. I do believe that once you've fully accepted Christ, that you are guaranteed a place in heaven. But I believe that part of that accepting of Christ is you choosing to live your life modeled after his life. So there's an expectation that you live your life that way. And the way that he lived his life was not that way. So I think his, he had a very strange idea about like owning people with his slavery, and I find it hard to, like, he's written Bibles where he kind of gave his commentary on the Bible, and I find it hard to, with all of his moral failure, to see where that Bible would have a lot of relevance. Now, one of the things he did when he was a president was, my brother's a Marine. And so whenever I hear the motto for the Marines, they talk about "to the shores of Tripoli." And I always wondered what that entailed. Like, how did that come about? Like, how did we go all the way to Tripoli and the Marines took over Tripoli? And so one of the good books that I've heard is an amazing book is about Jefferson and the pirates in the Barbary Coast, where we are shipping. Was it President Obama sworn in the Jefferson Bible? I don't know, Alan. That's a really good question. I don't know. I have Google here. I can find out. Was Obama sworn in with a Jefferson Bible? It says that he was sworn in with his own Bible, and Bibles used by Martin Luther King Jr. I'm assuming he got them from the King family. But yeah, he was not sworn in on the Jefferson Bible. Bibles from the King family. And it says Lincoln. What, Lincoln? Okay. Oh, that's a side note. But yeah. So I would assume no. If someone claims to be a Christian and doesn't change their bad behavior, are they saved? That is one of the questions that is really interesting to think of. Because if you're supposed to die to self and be raised again in Christ, so it's a literal spiritual death that you go through, and then a rebirth with the idea of Christ as a new creature, like you said. And he didn't live a changed life. So it definitely is like, where was that? What do you know about? I don't know much about the Jefferson Bible, Alan. I know he wrote one, and you can find them everywhere, but I haven't read one. I think it's a commentary on the Bible. I think what he did was he had a King James version and he commentated on it, kind of giving his ideas. So I think that's something very interesting that he did. I write a lot of notes in my Bible. I don't have it down here; it's upstairs. But those are notes that hopefully one day I pass on to my children. Not that I'm going to. I think it was a book without Jesus. He was a very interesting man, and so a lot of people claim that he was a stalwart Christian, but when you look into his life, I don't I don't think he was personally. I can't claim. Yeah, I didn't know him, but his behavior does not point to a Christian. So when we look into the rest of his presidency, and I was talking about the Pirates of the Barbary Coast, that was really, really interesting. So what was happening is our American sailors were getting kidnapped, and when they were getting kidnapped, they were being enslaved in northern Africa, and so he took offense to that and sent the Marines and all the way into Tripoli. So when you hear the anthem, and to the halls of Tripoli, the Marines actually stormed Tripoli, and we held Tripoli for a few days. And that was one of the things that he fought hard to keep white Americans from being enslaved, but cared nothing about the black Americans being enslaved. The Leathernecks. Yeah. Was it John Quincy Adams who read the Bible and then passed it on to his children? He passed almost all of his books onto his son, John Quincy Adams. But he would write in the margins. John Adams, he would read a Bible a year and then pass them on to his children. Yeah, I think so. I'm hoping to find out more when we get to John Quincy Adams, because he was really interesting. He had a lot to do with Russia and how Russia was dealing with things. But yeah, John Adams wrote like entire diatribes in his, like, it was like he was having conversations with the author. And so his son, John Quincy Adams, bought all of his books when he passed away. Interesting side note, where Adams and Jefferson died on the same day. Jefferson left his family almost $90,000 in debt. And Adams had like a $12,000, like he actually had money at his death. Kind of a difference in the thought processes. Down in Virginia, they lived big and large and had a lot of debt. And in the conservative Christian North, they did not live that way. They lived very in their means. So as he came out of office, he was followed then by his friend, James Madison, who became the fourth president, who I'm currently reading his book on now. Kind of also a very mild-mannered man. And they spent a lot of time talking back and forth. He was a very active participant in that presidency, where he was kind of giving a lot of advice to James Madison. James Madison's presidency, from what I understand, is kind of bogged down by the War of 1812, which was not avoided by Jefferson. It was kind of inevitable. Maybe we have made it a little bit worse. I don't know. And we'll get into that more with Madison. But basically, Britain didn't really want to give us our independence, and was kind of just really needling us with a bunch of different things. So it probably would have happened no matter who was the president. But Britain didn't really want us back, but they wanted to kind of teach us that they're still better than we are. So they came in and they burned the Capitol, Washington, D.C., and the White House all burned down. And the entire White House library was burnt to the ground. So Thomas Jefferson donated all of his books to the Library of Congress, which is now the actual Library of Congress, which we have because it hasn't burned since then. And Thomas Jefferson, for us book nerds, he did a lot for the book community and the Library of Congress. So that's one tick in his favor for sure. So the ideals, I wrote this in my notes too. Jefferson championed the ideas and values and teachings of the Enlightenment, which is what the idea of the forward of movement, the forward of engineering, the forward of new practices, things like that. That's kind of what he really was working towards. So talking about the end of his life, during his lifetime, Jefferson claimed ownership of over 600 slaves who were kept in his household and on his plantations. Since his time, talking about Sally, we talked about Sally Hemings already. She had her first child at 16. He founded the University of Virginia. That was his end of his life project that he did. The University of Virginia. He was the architect of it. He was the first president, and he was the head financier. That's probably a lot of the reason why he was in debt. He sunk a lot of money into the University of Virginia. He wanted to make it the best university in the United States at the time. And so he did a lot to found the University of Virginia. Again, he died on July 4th, 1826, the same day as John Adams. He wrote a very eloquent speech to be read during the celebrations for 4th of July. And that was kind of his... some people, you know how, like, at the end... Okay. See you, Alan. You're going to... Oh, you're watching the Suns game. Cool. I'm not a big basketball fan, but I appreciate it, man. If you want to join us in the Madison one, man, I'd love to have you. But he's definitely given the title of one of the best presidents we've ever had. He's definitely given the title of one of those presidents that has made a difference. He definitely expanded the country more than any other president. And he definitely created something amazing with the Declaration of Independence. With all his faults, he still had some great positives. And if you look at it through the lens of he was a man of his time, like John Meacham was trying to, that's what he says in his beginning, that Jefferson was a man of his time, and probably would have been very different in our time. But he was amazing at many things and had an interesting perspective about a lot of others. So I think I am currently reading this one. Sarah, I'll put your comment up. This is, but it did not have an audiobook. This is Madison, James Madison by Ralph Ketchum. It is, sorry, I need to hold it up. I got it on Thrift Books, and it came from the Library of Virginia. I think that this is the most in-depth biography, but there is one done by Lynn Chaney on Audible that is the one that I'm listening to the audiobook of. And then as I listen to audiobook, I'm skimming through the pages because this is very dry. And the Lynn Chaney one is more of a interesting take on like his life. It's called A Life Reconsidered. James Madison, A Life Reconsidered by Lynn Chaney. And I've never read anything that she's written before. And she has a very... she's a very good flowing writing style. So it makes it a little bit more enjoyable to listen to. And it doesn't sound like a textbook. But she references this book, the one by Ketchum, Ralph Ketchum, as the best biography about him. But it is very dry. So I'm kind of doing both because I could not find an audiobook of that one. So I have that one, and I'm listening to the audiobook of the other one. So, well, I will end it here. We're looking at 48 minutes. Did you guys have any other questions that you guys wanted to go over before we got done? Oh, I see your comment here. Sorry, it's got a bit of a delay. To think what Franklin and Jefferson could have accomplished if they'd been better focused. Yeah, I think it would have really had an interesting scope on our country. You know, what if Jefferson was not such a states' rights idealist, where he would have, you know, kind of not fought for state rights as hard as he did, and moved to a more federal government style. I find him very interesting. Like, I was intrigued the entire way through. It is definitely one of those books where you want to learn more about what he was doing, what he was about. But at the same hand, you're like, man, he just felt so wrong on so many things. Like, he fought so hard for the French when the French were being brutal during the French Revolution, where they were beheading upon beheadings with the guillotine. And he was like, oh, no, it's just, that's the forward progress of revolution. That, you know, and people would tell him, they would say, you know, that's not how we did revolution. We, the American people, were not brutal. We fought for what we believed in, but we weren't brutal to the public. We didn't go out and kill, the leaders of the British. We fought them honorably in battle. Unlike the French, where they drug them out of their homes and beheaded them in the street. But he was like, no, that's just normal revolution stuff. So he had ideas that were great, and then ideas that I go, man, how did you hold that ideal? And I think we have to, like he said in the book, he was a man of his time. And if we want to judge him by today's standards, he's going to be awful. But if we understand who he was in that time, maybe that's something about him. I'm currently reading Napoleon, and how odd how Jefferson approved of the rioting, murder, and yeah. Like, you, as a big fan of Lafayette, the friend of Alexander Hamilton, and really all the fathers of the country, Lafayette was treated so poorly by the French Revolution that I have a hard time supporting the French Revolution, because my boy Lafayette was treated badly. So, well, I'm going to end it here. That's just over 50 minutes, and I'm so thankful you guys hanging out with me. If you guys watch this later on and you have any comments, please leave a comment down below. I see those as well, and I will answer them in the comment section. Or if you'd like to join the Discord, there is a link for that if you'd like to join the Discord. And we have a whole presidential read-along there where we're sharing our thoughts in the moment. And I would love for you guys to join us there and start talking about Madison and then Monroe. And then, I didn't even know the order of the presidents before I started this. So this has been really, really fun. And I'm so thankful for you guys. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.